My name is Wahab. I'm from Kuwait and I'm a data science major.
Hi, my name is Mingxi and I'm from China, education and public policy major.
Hi, I'm Nile Gupta. I'm from India. I'm a senior in mechanical engineering.
Hi, my name is Mohammed. I'm from Saudi Arabia and I'm a finance major.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm from Indonesia and I'm a sophomore in biomedical engineering.
You know, given what just happened at Michigan State the other night, this is actually a really disturbing class to be having. So what I'd like to do today is just really kind of come down to a certain level of respect for all that has happened. To all of those who are gun owners and gun rights people, what I want you to know is that we're having a sociological conversation with people from other countries who are going to offer a way of understanding some things, okay, from different perspectives. And it's a really unique opportunity because, you know, here we are in the US, but when you're not from the US, you just see some things very, very differently about what has come to just be this normalized reality here in this country. And so for the gun people, what I want you to know is we're just having a sociological conversation. This is not an anti-gun class. I personally grew up with guns. I started shooting guns when I was 5 years old. So it's not about that. This is about a sociological reality of what we're dealing with. So who's got a question for the folks up front? Like who's got a question you would ask?
Just from like an outside perspective, like what do you guys think the reason in America is for like the gun violence you hear about?
Yeah, what's the story that you all tell about the reason for the gun violence here?
I don't want to generalize, but like I feel like there are certain people here that, you know, lack morals because America's like, you know, there are a lot of people from different countries and, you know, different, I wouldn't necessarily say religions, but from my perspective, I feel like there are a lot of people that don't have a lot of morals. And I don't want to generalize, obviously, but I've lived in like China, and in Chinese culture, like everybody's so peaceful, and there's rarely any violence when I lived there. And example for Saudi, we're like pretty religious. We're almost like we follow Muslim rules, Islamic rules, and because of that, there's rarely any violence that's going on.
In civilian life?
In civilian life, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
And I don't want to generalize, but I feel like the people that do commit these crimes just lack a lot of morals.
This is actually a really interesting question. So where he arrives at is it's a morality issue. It's like, it's about the way Americans are conceptualizing right and wrong. So a country in which morality itself, so this is just where he comes to, right? So this isn't right or wrong. This is what's really fascinating. The way he makes sense of this is like there's just a conceptualization of right and wrong in the moral codes that are really just kind of distorted or discombobulated or something, where it's just like somehow this is just more okay with a greater number of people. And bro, you're shaking your head. Do you agree with that?
I think, in a sense, if you are able to take someone else's life, there has to be something morally wrong. At the end of the day, remove the skin, remove the borders, remove the color, remove the religion. We are human beings. If you are able to take somebody else's life with gun or without guns, there has to be something morally wrong with you.
Okay, with you, but now I want to go to another question, though. In the United States, is one of the most advanced and prosperous societies that the world, the human beings have ever created. Powerful, advanced, prosperous, right? And yet, this is the state of affairs. So can you weigh in on that the moral codes around which our society is, or this society is organized, somehow accepts that. Can you go back one slide, Leah? That run, hide, fight is is the best way, the best thing that we could do to teach, starting at 5-year-olds. Like, we as a society have decided that starting at 5-year-olds, we're going to teach them to run, hide, fight. And this is the moral order around which we are going to build this world that we have, this country that we have, right? It's a society. Like, oh, it's a great country, and here it is. And we're so great that what we're going to do is we're going to teach our 5-year-olds to run, hide, fight as a way to deal with this thing out there, this violence that's like, it's like COVID or something, you know? It's just this hidden thing that's just scourge that's going to come at us at any moment. Do you have a thought on that?
I feel like this is also related to how United States was started. It's like at first there's a lot of people living in the rural area, so it's like kind of necessary for them to have guns to protect themselves, since they're like police cannot just go to different households and just protect them. And also I feel like since U.S. is more like an individualized society, everybody needs to take care of themselves.
Okay.
So that's why it's like all you can do is run,
Hide or
and
fight.
fight.
So listen, so you understand, so Americans in particular, what's being said here isn't right or wrong, okay? What's being said here is a foreigner, as someone who's outside the U.S., this is her as a young woman from China who's also lived in the U.S., as someone who's trying to make sense of who we are as a nation. And so it's like, oh, okay, it must just be this, right? You see that, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to try to make sense of this. Do you have anything you would add to this? Anybody want to add to this? And then we're going to come over here, right? With your question?
Generally, it's like kind of impossible to separate like guns from like American culture. Like at this point, it's like really ingrained in, so it'll never really be separated. So at this point, yeah, like there is no like I don't think there's a way to like lower the like gun violence, because guns are already like out there like in households and in the streets, so there is no way to take it back.
So but in Kuwait, right? So tell me this. In Kuwait, would you say that it's just impossible for Kuwaitis to separate the United States from guns and gun violence? The two are just like this. When you think of the U.S., you think of guns.
Yeah, especially because like every time you open the news, you'll hear about a new like mass shooting somewhere. So,
yeah.
Because like they go really viral, so it's natural that other countries would generally think, they'd connect the United States with like gun violence.
Yeah. It's so you agree with that?
So my question to you guys mainly.
Wait, hold the mic really close.
Can you?
Thanks. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. So my question is, like, there's a common view in the U.S. that it's like, oh, well, yeah, there's these gun violence deaths, but, that's the cost of being able to personally protect yourself. And sometimes it has validity, like what you were saying, Sarah, about, like, self-defense if the police can't arrive and whatnot. But some people will take it really far and be like, oh, civilians need to be able to protect themselves from their government if no civilians are armed and all that. Like, does that sound ridiculous to you guys, or do you guys feel that you can't protect yourselves?
Okay, that's a really good question. So how does that resonate with you all needing to protect yourself, A, from your government, the tyranny of your government, and B, or the possible tyranny of your government, okay, or B, protect yourself from other people who might do you harm? Like, how do you think about that?
Like, I understand where that sentiment comes from, because other than like most other countries, the United States isn't like as unified. Like, there is like a lot of like disagreements within. So especially because it is ingrained in the Constitution. So I do understand why they would like prefer to keep their guns, but at the same time, like I feel like especially now more often than not, it does go into like the wrong hands, and like it does like lead up to these like mass shootings.
Well, hang on though. Let me be clear on that. No, more often than not, the vast majority of people who own guns never accidentally kill someone with their guns. They don't accidentally shoot themselves. The gun doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Their guns are, you got 400 million guns in the United States, and it's really relatively rare that a child gets hold of the gun and kills themselves, right? Him or herself, takes the gun to school. I mean, it's really relatively rare that these things happen, okay? So when you just said right there, more often than not, it's like, no, actually, let's keep in mind that it's actually really still rare. It's just that what we're talking about is that it's so much more common than in other places. And number two, the other world has a perception of us, of the U.S., that's very different in many ways from the perceptions that we have of ourselves in this country, right? So, what was the question that I asked you to respond to? Wait, it was your question.
Yeah, the question was, do you feel unsafe without guns, like specifically from the government or other individuals if they were to attack you?
Yeah, like bro, you're from Saudi, man. Like you have a very authoritarian government, right? Really, and by authoritarian, what I mean is in the most general sense, right? It's like authoritarian means that power is being held. So I didn't say like fascist and totalitarian. Authoritarian in the most general sense. That's like you weigh here. Authoritarian means that an excessive or it's when a greater amount of power, a great deal of power, is in the hands of a small group of people in society, which is usually represented by the government. And there's no purely authoritarian government anywhere in the world. You can just kind of lean more in this direction, or you lean more in the direction of more democratic. There's no such thing as a pure democracy. You just have a more democratic government, which means that a greater, relative to what could be, a greater amount of power is in the hands of a greater number of citizens. So you see, right? So democracy doesn't exist. And authoritarianism doesn't exist. You can just be a little bit more democratic or a little bit more authoritarian. Well, Saudi Arabia is definitely a little bit more authoritarian. So like, how's that for you? Do you feel like I got to protect ourselves?
I think when the power is with the right people and our government, then you wouldn't really face any issues. Unless you really do any trouble, by trouble I mean like big trouble in Saudi, you really won't face any issues as a citizen or as an outsider, like as a foreigner that's coming to live in Saudi or visit.
Yeah.
You just have to follow the rules. There are rules that are placed, whether you like them or not.
Yeah.
You follow them, and if you follow them, you'll live a safe life.
Okay, so for example, like I can get a can of spray paint, and I can go out and spray paint on my house, down with the U.S. government sucks, right? And if you spray paint that on your house, you're going to get a knock on the door, going to be like, dude, what up, man?
Yeah,
you're going to be in trouble.
Obviously, with the government, usually you prefer not to speak, but at least in my perspective, I love my government, and they've done me well.
But the idea is, but what I'm hearing you say is, but just don't spray paint that on your house.
Yeah.
Like, whatever, what's the point? And like, what does it do for me? Like, I have the ability to go on the wall of my house and spray paint, the U.S. government sucks, or Joe Biden sucks. And like, I have the freedom to do that. Like, all right, so whatever. I have the freedom right now to go in the back room and take a sip of a beer. But like, I don't need to do that. Like, I don't have one back there. But if I did, like, what's the point? Like, I don't need to do that. I'll just wait till after class and go have a beer. But the question is, so you're saying like, no, I don't feel like I need to really protect myself. Nile, can you or Daniel respond to that? This is a really good question, by the way.
I think like specifically in India, if you have something that, like you said, like you complain about the government or something, more or less it's not the government that knocks the door. It's like it's the people who feel offended. Like they'll start saying that you're like not patriotic or like anti-India or something like that.
Yeah.
But even in that case, unless and until you don't know, it gets like so exaggerated to a level that you feel unsafe. We don't need that kind of like perspective that we need guns to protect ourselves.
Got you, right. I got you, right. So guns aren't really going to, once you get to that point, guns aren't going to help you. Do you have anything to add, Daniel, to this? Or?
So I think this is not about whether or not we feel safe with the government or not. I think it's just common sense. If you take guns out, everyone will be safe. There might be some little issue with it. I've seen it in Indonesia. There might be riots. People throw bottles or rocks at each other. But I'm pretty sure that is a better trade-off than giving people guns and having people shoot at each other.
Yeah.
And it's just common sense. Everyone's safer. So, yeah, that's just my view.
Okay, listen. Somebody else, bro. You're on, man.
So you guys keep talking about other people shooting other people, but for the 2019 stat he put up, 3 in 5 of those gun deaths were suicide. Does that change your view on the morality issue?
I think, like, personally speaking, I've been in the US for like almost more than 4 years now. I do not have like an issue with people carrying guns, but the issue with me is that people who are ready to use it to take lives, be it their own or somebody else's, that is like an alarm for me. And that, like, again, taking someone else's or your own life, again, taking like a soul, that is immoral.
Yeah, but most people don't. I mean, very few people do, right? So, you know, think about this. Very few people actually use a gun on another person. So this is what we're struggling with. Like, how do we make sense of this world? How do you all make sense of this place called the United States, where we have this, relatively speaking, an excessive amount of violence, relatively speaking, right?
So I'm also from India, and I've been here for like 2 years now, and I sort of disagree with the morality argument in general, because I think it's not about, okay, Americans don't have strong moral grounds. You know, I personally don't know any American who's like, yeah, sure, like I wouldn't feel bad going and doing a mass shooting. You know what I mean? Like, I know,
or like we should. It's okay, just go out and shoot people. That's
exactly.
all right. Yeah.
I think everyone, sure, morals are subjective and all of that stuff, but I don't think being in a different country defines your morals in a way that you're comfortable using a gun and killing someone. It's more of, I think, the accessibility of a gun. So if an American is in a certain state of mind and has an access to the gun, he would use it. But at the same time, someone from some other country who's also in the same state of mind, but if they have access to the gun. So I think it's more about the access rather than the morality point of view. Because I don't think someone thinks that, hey, going into a school and shooting people is something that's okay on a moral basis.
Yeah, listen, nobody thinks that, right? Nobody thinks that. You want the mic? Yeah. Nobody thinks that. The guy in Michigan the other night, he's mentally ill, right? First off, anyone who does that is mentally ill, right? Like, I think that we can say that if I want to define mental illness, one very clear definition of mental illness would be to take a gun and go out and randomly kill people. Like that could be the very first line in Sam's definition of mental illness. So everybody who does that is mentally ill, right? So, all right, bro.
I mean, one of the statistics that like we don't really see, and like I don't know if I've ever possibly saw, but I've always like thought about, like is like, you know, we see like, yeah, there's a lot of gun deaths, but like it's really like, in my opinion, it's about murder, because if you're gonna go kill somebody, like you're gonna kill somebody, like. And just because we have more guns in the United States means that there's going to be more gun deaths. But like, it's like murder is just murder.
Well, yes and no, though, right? So here's the thing. So go back to the one slide that I put up, right? All other murder statistics in the U.S. are equal to the murder statistics of other industrialized nations. So people that use a knife, people that use a baseball bat, people that use whatever, strangle people, whatever. The data are the same. It's what stands out for this country are gun deaths. And the reason is because A, guns are prevalent, and B, it's just really much easier to shoot somebody than not. I mean, you just can do that very quickly. And now we have guns that, have like high capacity. And so you can just kill a lot of people very quickly. So that's a difference here in that. But yeah, dude. Anyway, good. You have a question? Here, hang on, bro.
So I think it was kind of touched on, but did you think it's more of a morality issue? Like he mentioned, if you're going to kill someone, you're going to kill someone, or
Hold it close.
Like the ability, the ease at which someone can get a gun. As someone from Texas, like we had Uvalde in the summer, and then 2 days after we hosted the NRA convention in Houston, where I'm from, and then both those guns were bought legally. And so our governor runs on like the slogan, "This is the easiest state to obtain a gun." Mm-hmm. All those guns were obtained legally in both the shooting back in 2018 in Galveston as well as the one at Uvalde.
Well, okay, so let me ask you, as someone from Texas, right? So here you have people from other nations that just really see this totally different. Like, what do you need guns for? What's the point? Like, you could also have a society whereby the U.S. could be a place whereby you're not teaching 5-year-olds to run, hide, fight, whatever. You're not doing that. Like we don't do that in our schools. Like none of those people up there do that and learn any of that in their schools. So, but we say no. But we want that, and it's worth it somehow. So, like, what do you think people would say to them to convince them? No, but this is the best way to live. Like this is us. This is who we are as Americans. Like, what would you say? What would people in Texas say? By the way, I mean, obviously there are as many opinions as there are Texans, but.
Yeah. I mean, personally, the way I was raised, a lot of my family did have guns, not my parents directly, but like my grandparents did. So like, I've kind of accepted that a lot of people get it. My brother owns 2. And sometimes for personal protection, especially living in inner city neighborhoods where it's maybe not as safe. But coming from the suburbs, people do kind of stockpile them. It's something at 18. Like a lot of my friends went to go buy a gun because at this point they couldn't drink alcohol, buy cigarettes, like nicotine.
Dude,
so buying a gun was a rite of passage for them at 18 because they could.
So it just is. So we're just, and I think alcohol and guns, the perfect mix, right? So the idea is that it just is a thing that's built into a culture. So do they even question it? Do people even sit around and be like, wait, is this like really make sense?
I mean, honestly, not really. I mean, open carry is legal. So like I will often, like when I'm home this summer, I go to the mall, and even at the office, some people literally had firearms on them or in their car at the time because that was just like the norm for where I come from.
Okay. Does anybody else? Hey, thanks. Yeah. Bro.
So you said mentally ill. Don't you think the word terrorist is the more appropriate term?
Terrorist. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I could argue that many terrorists probably are mentally ill. But I mean, if you allow yourself to be brainwashed into an ideology that certain ideologies, I would say, like ISIS, for example, I would be like, yeah, those motherfuckers. I would say that's mental illness too.
But
right?
Don't you think the word mentally ill like belittles whatever he did? Like what they did is like terrorism. It's not something that mentally ill people do.
Yeah, maybe. I think I could probably make that argument too. Yeah, I could probably make that argument. Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of a question for you or for anyone who might know the answer, because I kind of always wondered it, but I'm not sure what it is. So you spoke at the beginning of class how when you were a kid you had nuclear bomb threat drills and stuff, not run, hide, fight. That wasn't a thing. And I think back to my parents growing up and my grandparents growing up, that wasn't a thing for them, pre-Columbine. So if laws haven't gotten more lax on guns, and if anything, they seem to have been getting stricter, what is the common factor over time that has made mass shootings go up? Because if it's not gun laws, then what else?
Yeah. So in some
curious.
places, laws have become more strict, but in most places, it's become easier to obtain guns. There are many more guns. There are many more people. The Houston High School, where it's a rite of passage, it wasn't always a rite of passage, so it becomes even more and more. So more people think they need a gun. When Obama is elected, because Obama is black guy, so we got to watch black people, and because black people, so like the rate of gun purchase just went through the roof, and because Obama was a communist, so he was going to take everybody's guns, and so that makes it go even higher. And then one thing after another, it just everything is like, I need a gun. He has a gun, so I need a gun. Oh, but he's got a bigger gun than my gun, so now I got to get 2 guns. And like, oh shit, he just got another one. I got to get a 3rd one. It's just that kind of stuff. So I think that there's a lot that just happens in that way. And for me, and I want to know if anybody, and so that's a really good question. So for me, my question here, the thing that I'm trying to get us just to think about, and I want to get anybody to respond at this level, is that sometimes what is seen as normal in a given society is like water to fish. The water doesn't, the fish doesn't understand water because the fish is in water all the time, 100% of the time. So the fish doesn't know what water is, doesn't think about water. It's just not part of its reality. That's how culture is for a society. Like you don't think about culture, it's part of it. So like this whole gun stuff, it just becomes like, run, fight, hide, or whatever. It's like, I just learned that. It's like, but it's like if you stop to think about the fact that some of these things, it's like, damn. And so we have these representatives in the room from other countries where this is not normal. Bro.
Another question I have is like, there's also like a massive gender divide when it comes to domestic terrorism. And like how it's almost entirely men.
Yeah, it's at 9 out of 10. It's actually only about 90%, which is surprisingly, I would think it'd be higher than 90%, but I just read that. Yeah.
Where does it come from?
Where's that come from?
Still that just number. It's crazy.
Maybe it just comes. Where do you think it comes from, bro?
Men's mental health is horrible in this country.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are people that study this. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe like, I don't know, man. Bro, did you have a response to that?
I kind of had a building on that.
Okay, building on that question, yeah.
So like you said, men's mental health obviously isn't very good in this country. So like, I guess sort of a question for you guys, like, if we're kind of, right now it seems like the U.S. is sort of in like a mental health epidemic sort of thing. So like, if this were to happen maybe in China or in Saudi Arabia or places like that, like what do you think the outcome would be if you didn't have access to guns? Because obviously guns are the worst possible way of remediating that problem.
Yeah, so let me reframe the question. This is a really good question. So for the 5 of you, can a couple of you take this? Like I mentioned, Sarah, I mentioned knife killings. Like it's like this thing that's been happening more and more in China. It's like people, and it's all men, go into schools or other public settings with a big knife, like a butcher knife, and they kill a lot of kids. There have been school killings where like 10, 15, 20 little kids have been killed by almost all men with knives. But the question is, for you all, when this kind of thing happens in your country, what do you chalk it up to? What's the cause of it?
I feel like because guns are very uncommon in Kuwait.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like some kind of mass something where people, and we're talking about men here, like go out and commit some like heinous act. What do you chalk that up to?
If someone just commits like a random heinous act, like they usually just like generalize it to, they're insane, because mental health isn't very like prevalent. Especially I'd say especially in the Middle East. So they just chalk it up to, that person is like insane. That person, like there isn't like like a specific answer. It's just they're insane, and if they don't, like they'd either like depending on the crime, they'd either like execute them or just put them like in an asylum.
Yeah, so it would be. But in here, the irony, and then somebody else, Daniel, do you ever?
I feel like there's gonna be always insane people out there in the world, and there's nothing we can do to change it. But the problem with giving them with guns is that if guns are just going around and some crazy people somehow happens to get that gun, then all hell break loose and it's just gonna be a mess. So I figured that could have, like, we cannot remove craziness off the earth. It's gonna be there regardless.
Okay, so here's a thought. So Americans, tell me if I'm off base on this. I feel like increasingly, when something happens, someone takes a gun and kills a lot of people, or a knife, or whatever it is, we don't start with the fact that they're insane. We don't start with a mental illness. We start with that, oh, I can't believe that person went into a school and did X, Y, or Z. I start with mental illness because in my mind, anyone who does that is, again, at the top of my list of people who are mentally ill. But we as a society don't start there. We start, oh, it's a disgruntled worker, or it's an unhappy person, or it's this or that. But we don't start with mental illness. And I think, wow, that's so... Am I right on that? Are there any Americans that could you weigh in on that? Is that like, am I like...
So I'm from...
Look forward. Yeah, look forward.
So I'm from South Florida, and the Parkland shooting happened near where I was, and the first thing that people talked about was like bullying. That was the first thing they went to was, you should be nice to the quiet kid. But that's not necessarily true. It's not all quiet kids who are shooters. It's just that mentally ill people are the ones who are driven to do that. It's not just bullying, I feel
So the idea wasn't, it was that he was bullied and this was retaliation,
yeah, that
not
he was
mental
always
illness.
alone and that it was everybody else's fault and not really his fault.
Uh-huh.
So that is just something that I don't agree with.
So this is a really interesting thing as a sociologist, right? You want to understand causality. So you look at all the invisible strings that are leading people to act in the ways they act. And so here we have, oh yeah, we have all this bullying stuff or whatever. It's like, oh my God, we're taking responsibility off the individual and put it in on society, but we're not looking at other issues like the 400 million guns, for example. Yeah. Sarah, last comment, and then Leah. Yeah.
I feel like I think it's almost also the same in China. It's like when we hear like people goes to a school and kill people, and we're like, oh, it's because too much pressure from the school side.
Right,
and
right.
Just that person dislikes the school and hates the system or something.
They're unhappy, and so, yeah.